On today's show, Crossroads legend Jane Rossington recalls relationships both on screen and off.
Suddenly, the chap I'm married to turns out to be a bigamist.
Plus, cult couple Neil and Christine Hamilton have difficulty seeing eye to eye.
It was a great shock to me when Christine told us we were getting married.
It wasn't at all. You're quite wrong. It wasn't a shock at all. I'll tell you what happened.
It was a shock to the system when I realised it wasn't just talk.
I didn't really fall for actors on the whole. I was always more interested outside the business. Not that I met that many outside the business when we were really into Crossroads in a big way. And then, in fact, what happened to me is that the head of makeup, Anne, who was a dear friend of mine, and also I'd been to school with by strange chance when I was very small, and she said, "I know somebody who you'll be just right for." She said, "He's quite unusual, though. Just play it by ear." And I think she'd had a chat to him as well, because there we were sitting side by side at this dinner party, very much dinner parties in those days, and we're sitting next door to each other, sort of doing one of these, and we got on quite well, and really it all started there. So I got involved really on a blind date. This was the time of the 3-day week. Now, you won't remember this, but what was happening, there was a great electricity problem, and the lights were off on one side of the road 3 nights a week, and they were on the other side, and vice versa. And there was problems with gas as well. It was winter of our discontent and all that. It was very difficult, early 1970s. And we went out for dinner to our favourite restaurant. And when we got there, no lights on, but they had got gas on, so they could cook. So we thought, oh, wonderful, this is going to be so romantic and so lovely. And we sat down and we were having a drink and we just were looking at the menu. And suddenly a coach party appeared. And, well, I say appeared through the gloom, you know, and the candles and everything. And they just moved in on the table and said, "Oh, it's Jill," and all this. And I was thinking, I thought something romantic was going to happen. Well, of course, nothing romantic could happen with all these people about. So in the end, we went home and back to the candlelit flat. And it was another day when he actually said, "Well, I think perhaps we ought to get married. It'd be great fun and all the rest. And will you marry me?" Now, he says that he doesn't remember this, that he had been at the dentist, and I'd picked him up from the dentist, and he was so scared or something that he'd had to have an injection. And he said it had affected him and he couldn't remember what he'd said. That's what he said. We got married shortly after that, about 3 months after that. And looking back, again, I couldn't do that now because everything has to be booked years in advance, doesn't it? Well, I just did it all in 3 months. It was all a bit of a rush. I think we had to get married on a Friday because they said, "Oh, all the Saturdays are booked and this." And I said, "Well, OK, we'll get married on a Saturday." And I went to see him. I haven't got any time off. "Oh, right, that Friday will do. We'll get married then." And that's really what happened. I don't think we had quite what goes on now. We didn't have all these, I didn't have a veil or anything like that. I just had a hat. And I did have a long dress, but nothing particularly spectacular. Certainly not off the shoulder. My mother would have been horrified going into church without my arms covered. And we did have quite a nice, fun reception, which was a sort of great meeting point of lots of old friends, which was lovely. Look what I found. Yes, doesn't look too bad. It's been wrapped up for years. Lace has gone a bit funny, but apart from that, it's pretty good. So the big day dawns, not that far away, of course, because it was only about 6 weeks. And it had been a real rush to get it all organised. And of course, being Friday, the rest of the cast really couldn't come because they were all working. It just happened that I had that Friday off because I wasn't in that particular story. Anyway, when the day finally dawned and off we go, and we had a car that the co-op had insisted that we had in white, a white Daimler, and off we go to the belfry from the church. And there was a red carpet laid out, and the guy driving it had never driven one of these before. And he said, "What do I do? There's a red carpet. Do I drive over it?" I said, "Yeah, you have to. Otherwise we're not going to make it to the red carpet." So we did that, and that was all right. And it all went actually quite smoothly, and they just managed to get a bit of they managed to do a bit of filming or something and put it on the local news, which was lovely. And in those days, you didn't have weddings that went on all night. It was all over by 6 o'clock. And we were off down the motorway, and we stayed the night somewhere. We stayed the night in Godstone at a 13th century coaching inn. And on our first anniversary, we thought, what a good idea to go back. It had closed. After the 13th century, it had closed. Well, I've managed to find a few things, I think. Now, let's see what we've got here. Oh, yes. There's the press cutting of our chauffeur, all dressed in white, standing outside the Daimler. I think we're both laughing. Oh, that's one of my favourite photographs. That's, yeah, I've got Mummy's necklace on. That was my something borrowed, you see. And I've got my bouquet and my hat and everything. Yeah, I really like that one. That's just assorted people, lots of people. Family. My mum and dad and my 2 nieces being bridesmaids, which was lovely. My parents-in-law. And that's me being a bit pensive, I think. Just sort of thinking on my own. My hair's looking a bit bedraggled. It must have been later in the day. Now this one, oh, that's a nice one. We're just chatting, which is quite fun. This is obviously at the reception. I'm sitting next to my father, and my dear David is just whimsically looking at the camera. And there we are again. It's all in the grounds of the church. Very nice grounds of the church. A lot of trees, very wooded. Oh, there we are again outside the White Daimler. It does take you back, doesn't it? There's 1 or 2 people who aren't here anymore too, which is a bit sad, but that's life, isn't it? Oh, that's nice. Oh, it's lovely to see them. It's lovely to see pictures of my mum and dad, and you sort of forget about it, really. Sad. Oh, there's a lovely picture here. What a chance for Jill's juniors, it says. They're both looking very serious. Saul on one side and Harry on the other. Gosh. And there we are in... That must have been in the grounds of the church. I think that's the new little bit of church hall at the back. New then, I mean, it's probably 30-something years old now. Of course, in contrast to my real life, which I thought was, looking back, was relatively conventional, my stage life, my television life was rather different. And of course, I've actually got through, not a lot really, for 24 years, but I started off with my first marriage where I don't even remember getting married, so I think it must have been off-screen. Suddenly, the chap I married to turns out to be a bigamist, and this is because they decided to change the storyline, and they didn't want him anymore, so it all suddenly changed. And so that was the first thing. And then I met Stan, dear Stan, played by a very dear friend of mine, Edward Clayton. And that went on for 8 years. He decided to leave, so we then suddenly we got divorced, and I can't remember quite all about that. And then I was, if you like, free. Now there was any possibilities you like. And eventually, after various sort of stories and whatever, I do get married to Tony Adams, playing Adam Chance, and became Mrs. Chance. And then the next wedding, my final wedding, is when I married Tony again. Now, I'm not totally convinced that we ever got divorced, but the new people would not. I said, I'm not sure we ever got divorced. And they said, well, for the purposes of the programme, you did. So I said, OK, fine, I did. So we got married again, which was the momentous day when I suddenly realised the other day that I was wearing virtually the same clothes as the first wedding. I had a cream hat and a cream dress. It's quite bizarre, however. And of course that ended up with me in the lake. Very strange. So 35 years, you start to take stock a bit, don't you? And now what do I want to happen? In the next, well, I don't think it'll be the next 35 years, but the next few years, I would like us both to not be doing quite so much and taking life a little bit easier. Now, whether that's possible, certainly with a grandson and another one on the way, you know, I don't know. And we've always lived hectic lives, so I can't imagine it's going to change that much. But it would be nice to do a little bit of the Darby and Joan bit. Whether I'll be able to or not, I don't know.
Next.
Neil's proposal, good heavens. I've never had one. Still waiting.
We started off, it was just a husband and wife team. We had 10 fabulous staff, most of whom are still here today, and we've grown that into a 5,000 square feet shop with 75 strong team of staff. Rich and I have been in business since 1992, so we're 15 years this year in business, which is fantastic. And it was always my dream to have a spa that felt very chic and she, but that wasn't particularly large. So we have 3 fantastic treatment rooms and a wealth of experience with our girls, most of whom have been with me for years and years. And we do grooming, metro chic treatments. So we do waxing, facials, manicures, pedicures, you name it, we do it in the spa. Minnie Driver has been in, we've had Elizabeth Hurley, we've had Trini and Susanna come back very, very often, which is fabulous. And they will have waxing, facials. They're very big fans of a skincare range that we have called Jan Marini. Tara Palmer-Tompkinson comes in all the time, who's a lovely client. And she has everything done, you know, fake tan, she has to go somewhere and she has to look bronzed. Hair, obviously, all the time. But we also do a lot of men. So we're very fortunate we do Michael Caine, who's a very nice client of ours. You name it, we can go through the names. So this is our Metro Spa. We have 3 treatment rooms here. We have an area to have pedicures and obviously fingernails as well. First of all, our bride-to-be would come in here to get changed, and we would ask her to get rid of any rings or anything else that she had on, and she would get changed into a robe so that she's prepped up for a day of pampering. We have our shower here, fabulous shower, which we need the bride to go in and shower off all the exfoliant, scrub and all of that, so her skin's all nice and soft. And then into one of the treatment rooms. I think the worst thing is for the bride is that they have to come to terms with the fact that whatever pictures they have done that day, they're going to look at them, hopefully, for the next 25 years. So for me, it's really key that we make sure they have a look that doesn't date, that they're going to feel proud of in 10 years' time. So it has to be chic and it has to be right for them. So we have 3 treatment rooms here. So our bride-to-be would come straight into a room such as this, and this is where she would have her pampering experience. So as you can see, this room has been set up for a very relaxing treatment, something like a sort of a hot stone treatment or something like that, which would unwind and relax our bride to calm those nerves down. We would also get the hair tip-top, so that would involve a course of intensive treatments. And then colour-wise, it depends what her needs were. But if it was highlights, probably do those 2 or 3 days beforehand. And we would also advise that any bride has some sort of gloss, which would just really add depth and shine. So the hair has to look immaculate on that day. It's the most important day of your life, but hair has to look shiny, glossy, full of life, full of health. And this is what we call our throne. So this is where our bride-to-be would have her feet exfoliated, pampered, massaged, the nails filed, buffed and shined for her big day. And this is our treatment room that's been set up for the really important bits of grooming for the bride-to-be that sometimes get missed. That's things like eyelashes, eyelash tinting, eyebrow grooming, which can really be key to get that perfect bridal look.
We met decades and decades ago.
Nearly 40 years ago, in fact. I know we don't look that old.
No, I know. We were kind of 18. And we were at separate universities, and we met at a student political conference at this wonderful place called Swinton Castle. Anyway, there were about, actually there were lots of budding politicos there, and I looked across the crowded room and I saw this thing he had big black bushy sideburns, and I thought to myself, that'll do for the weekend. And that
been a very long weekend.
Very long weekend. And I have to tell you, also at the conference was Anne Widdecombe.
Yes. So if I'd played my cards differently, then the course of history might have been very different from what's turned out, isn't it?
I might have been the Member of Parliament for Maidstone and she might have been Mrs Neil Hamilton.
Yes.
We courted for about 3 years, didn't we? Separate universities and all. We met up at all sorts
Then I was unceremoniously dumped. Women are terribly cruel creatures, as you know. And this one is no exception. So I was then cast into the abyss of bottomless darkness, and while she went off to the bright lights and do a bit of gold digging in London.
I was already at the bright lights, that's the whole point. He spent 3 years at university. He did 8 years. He did 3 degrees, for goodness sake. I just did my one. I came trotting to London. I'm working at the House of Commons, palace of my dreams. It was wonderful. And he was then doing the second of these degrees. He was stuck on the mid-Wales coast. It was a day's journey from London then, and it still is now. And I was 21, and I was London life. I got my little flat, and everything was wonderful.
It was swinging London.
It was,
in those days.
And frightfully important people like members of Parliament, you gods and little fishes, demigods, inviting me out for dinner. And I thought, what's the point in having a boyfriend who's got no grant? He'd finished his grant, his father had cast him off, hundreds of miles away. I thought, sod this for a lark. Halfway through the sort of time when we weren't together, we got on exchanging Christmas cards, and he invited me out for lunch at a place called the Gay Hussar in Soho, which is a great left-wing haunt. I assumed that because he'd taken me to the Gay Hussar that he could afford it. Honestly, he spent about 3 months student grant, and you couldn't afford.
No, I wasn't a student then.
And you didn't get anything really. That was that. I just said, thank you very much, nice to see you. And then we toddled on.
Anyway, what I did get in return was an offer to reciprocate, that she would do dinner in her flat at some stage. Anyway, so 3 years later, I arranged to come around to a little flat several floors below here. And so I turned up on the 17th of February 1978, and I've been here ever since.
Neil's proposal, good heavens. I've never had one. Still waiting. No, I told him we were getting married.
It was a great shock to me when Christine told us we were getting married.
It wasn't at all. You're quite wrong. It wasn't a shock at all. I'll tell you what happened.
It was a shock to the system when I realised it wasn't just talk.
The crucial moment came because we were running up to a general election, which became the 1983 general election. And I knew, and he knew, that in order to get a safe seat, which is what he wanted then, it was much better to have a fiancée than just to have a girlfriend. We were driving up the M1, and I said, look, we're going to get married, and then on your CV you can have fiancé, my name, and the date of the wedding and all that. I said, it'll just look so much better. So he kind of said, right.
So I nearly did a swerve into the barrier in the central reservation.
No, you
bounced
didn't.
off again. No, I didn't.
You didn't. No, honestly, we knew we were going to get married. It was just a question of getting round to it. And we got married on the 4th of June, 1983, which was 5 days before the general election, and that is his fault. Well, because he was fighting a seat.
My fault. It was Margaret Thatcher's fault. She called the election.
She did, you're quite right. But Neil's constituency was up in Cheshire, Tatton, and my parents were then living on the Lizard Peninsula, deepest Cornwall, as far as you can go, just about, right down on the coast there. It was lovely, which of course is where we got married, in a gorgeous little church lit only by candles.
On the beach.
On the beach.
Right on the beach.
But we had to drive from Cheshire down to Cornwall on the Friday. We got married on the Saturday afternoon, and we had to be back in the constituency in Cheshire by lunchtime on Sunday. So
guess, 6 or 7 hour drive.
Guess where we spent our wedding night? The Exeter Crest Motor Lodge Hotel in single beds. And I never had a honeymoon. We were going to Venice, and I have still never been to Venice. I'm still waiting. I didn't wear white because I thought, this is absurd. I don't want to toddle up the aisle in white looking like some bit of meringue. So I was discussing it with the fellow who married us, a chap called James Owen. And he said, Christine, he said, the traditional colour of brides is actually blue, it's not white. And long before brides were in white, they were in blue. So I said, right. So I had a sort of aquamarine, bluey, greeny, silk, stripy dress, which, now this is interesting, which I had made by a shop called Anna Belinda in Oxford. And Anna Belinda was the front for a drugs organisation of Mr. Howard Marks, who was once Britain's most wanted
Mr. Nice.
man. Howard Marks came along, who was deep into drug smuggling, soft drug smuggling. This is in the days of marijuana and all that, make it clear. Howard is great. He's now a good friend of ours. We knew nothing about this at the time of getting married, but in the 60s, Howard set the girls up. So they sewed away, and he laundered the money through the business. I have no idea. They were blissfully unaware. It was a very simple wedding. I'll tell you what was lovely about it. Because we'd known each other such a long time, a lot of people came into the church and they honestly didn't know which side to sit on, because we were just Neil and Christine. And since Neil left politics, or politics left him 10 years ago now, we really had no idea what we were going to do. And our motto in life is, if it's legal, honest and faintly decent, we're up for it. And that has seen us do such bizarre things, you know, pantomime, the Rocky Horror Show. We took a show to the Edinburgh Festival last year. We're going back this year. We do a lot of speaking, television. Neil has a regular column in a Sunday newspaper.
The Sunday Express, let's name it.
Sunday Express. I've done the vagina monologues, all sorts of daft things. And
I haven't done puppetry of the penis as yet, but you never know.
You never know. If we'd named 10% correctly of the things we've done, I'd be surprised.
Well, life is what happens to you when you're making other plans, isn't it?
It is. The secret of a successful marriage, well, there's 4 things, really. 4 things you need. First of all, you need luck to find the right person. Then you need lust to get you off the ground to start with. Then you need love, of course, when the whole thing blossoms and etc. And you need laughter, don't you, darling? You need laughter. You need to be able to laugh together, even at yourselves, at everything else. But I think it's...
A bit of lolly wouldn't go amiss as well, but it's not absolutely essential.
We've had the lolly and we've not had the lolly, so we know
as
what
Michael
it's like.
Caine said, I've been rich and I've been poor, and I know which is better.
But I think, to be honest, all the old cliches, it's give and take, you know, with emphasis on the give. Putting the other one first, it's as simple as that. It sounds so simple when I say it, doesn't it? I must try it sometime.
Next time on Celebrity Brides Unveiled, B-movie bombshell Mamie Van Doren on her 5 Hollywood marriages and star-studded celebrity affairs.
Burt Reynolds, you know, he was in Cosmopolitan with his, you know, a hat over it. And I says, I got to see what's behind that hat.
All that and more on the next Celebrity Brides Unveiled.